Tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, welcome to the Power Hub podcast. We have today on the show Dr Ellen Joan Ford. Now, she's a leader, a researcher, a military veteran, international speaker. She's done a TEDx talk, a facilitator, consultant, and parent. That's a lot of skill set. She specialises in inclusive leadership capabilities and workplace culture. She has been awarded the Kiwi Bank New Zealander of the Year, the Sir Peter Blake Leadership Award, and is the author of #WorkSchoolHours. Ellen, welcome to the show. It's fabulous to have you here.
Thanks, Jess. I'm excited about this.
Yes, I'm excited to chat to you. When just reading through your bio, all the things you've done, the places you've been, you've got a great story to share. Tell us a little bit about your story, sort of how you came to do the work you're doing, what led to that, and all of these roles, I guess, that you've had that have led you to some of these insights and experiences.
Yes, well, I almost feel like what I'm doing now is kind of like what I'm meant to be doing, in the sense that I've been very lucky. I've had really varied career experiences, and kind of bringing them all together has joined up to what I'm doing now. So, I had time serving in the military, leading soldiers, New Zealand and overseas, and that was just an incredible experience, an amazing opportunity to practice and learn about leadership. I then went into the corporate sector, which was obviously quite a different route again, both leading people in there and then also consulting. Then I did, actually in parallel, I did a really intense academic journey. So I did my MBA, PhD, and some postdoctoral research all on leadership. And so it was kind of bringing those things together, as well as becoming a parent, to sort of shape what it is that I'm doing now, which is really about trying to make leadership more inclusive so that workplaces are better.
Yeah, awesome mahi to be doing. And what, if you look back on your journey and your story, what are some of the moments that you could point to and say, yep, these are pivotal moments, or the ahas, or the kind of reinventions of things that you had to learn and unlearn? What have been some of those major occurrences on your journey that has led to what you know now?
Oh, okay. So I've got a few. I'm thinking, so one would have been when I was in the army, this is very specific. I was in Antarctica, which was just incredibly lucky to be there with a team. And I remember just thinking, this is so cool. Like, you don't get to just come here as a tourist. And so I remember saying to the team, let's get our work done and then let's go and explore and kind of have fun. And so that particular incident, which I've then had the same approach going forward, was one of the fundamental shifts in my mind around focusing on outputs as opposed to hours. So it was all about, let's get our outputs done so that we can go and play. And I've kind of taken that going forward as, how do we focus on outputs as opposed to hours so that we can go and do the other things that are meaningful in life? So I think that would be one of them. Another quite pivotal one, Jess, was also in the army. So with one exception, I only ever led men. I was only ever led by men. And the army is a really physical career. You get a lot of credibility for being fast and for being strong. And I was really fit, but I was never going to be at the front of the pack of 50 men. Right? You're not going to have 50 men and then suddenly Ellen is at the front. That's just not going to happen. And so I learned quite quickly that I had to find my own way of leading. And it really encouraged me to find my own authentic leadership style, because I physically couldn't just emulate what all the blokes were doing. And the more I've kind of honed into that, the more I realized that I think all of us, the better we are at actually just being ourselves and kind of leaning into our own skills and our own qualities, the better we are as leaders. So that would be kind of another lesson, I think, is around authentic leadership. And perhaps another one, Jess, would have been shaped partly by becoming a parent myself, but I did postdoctoral research on the experiences of working parents. And I just found myself so pissed off that we live in this world where we are expected to work as if we don't have children, and we're expected to parent as if we don't have a job. And that was another really kind of pivotal moment where I was like, well, I've got to do something about this. I'm not happy with the situation and it needs to change. So there are probably, a few of the quite pivotal moments, I think, for my
career. And they're big ones. They're such important ones. There's a couple of things to pick up in that. I think one of the things that you mentioned, particularly for women that lead in male-dominated environments, or just that exist in male-dominated environments. There is that tendency sometimes to want to try and emulate what you see around you, or what's being role modeled. So almost like I need to change something about myself to fit in, rather than, as you beautifully described, being yourself and that being your point of difference. What were some of the challenges that you had to overcome, and how did you go about working in such a male-dominated environment to ensure that you thrived and you could stay true to yourself?
Yeah, so Jess, there were moments that were actually hard. So I don't, I'm really positive and upbeat and I am excitable, but not everything was unicorns and rainbows. I remember, so when I did best in the army is when I would be on a task, whether that was somewhere else in New Zealand or somewhere overseas, and I would have my team that I was leading. And that is when I felt like I was thriving. I could be myself. I engaged with the team. I loved it. I felt like I was thriving. The times when I probably found it a little bit more of a struggle was more actually when I was back around people that were my bosses. And I would regularly throughout my career, I'd get feedback from my superiors or my leaders saying, Lieutenant Ford, you're doing a great job. You're meeting all the requirements, tick, 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 mission achieved. But we need to talk about your leadership approach. And I would constantly get phrases like, you're too friendly, you're too bubbly, you need to kind of tone it down. And I remember one time I was told by my boss, he said, Ellen, maybe just don't smile as much. And I was, Jess, I was 26 at the time. And I just took that on board to be like, oh my gosh, like asking me not to smile is asking me not to be Ellen. And he was sort of saying to me, good leaders are not like you. And that hurt. Like, honestly, I was really quite heartbroken. And so I actually had a wee stint after that, Jess, of trying to do it the way my bosses kept telling me to do it. And so for this one particular trip, exactly what you just said, I was trying to fit in. I totally hardened myself. I became really standoffish, didn't smile, was so serious. And I did that task, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity because I was like, oh my goodness, I did a shit job. Like it was not fun. My team did not get the best of me. And so I thought, no, bugger it. I'm going to just keep being myself because I've done that and I know that it works. I've given it a go the way the bosses have said, and that's not for me. And since then, I feel like I've leaned into it more and more. Like the more I'm myself, the better I do. And I help other people do that. And I say the same thing. When we just be ourselves and be authentic, we actually deliver better results for our team as well.
Oh, 100%. And yet it's so difficult when you're in those environments where you are the odd one out and you're being told that that's wrong, as opposed to, wow, this is something refreshing and different that we could really kind of use around here. And I think it's common for so many women. And ironic, right, that it was your smile, because so often it's the opposite for women. They're told, you've got to smile more because that's what's expected of women. And yet we often have this double bind, don't we? This sort of, as a woman, you're expected to do one thing and be judged by those criteria that are quite sort of, feminine presenting. And then as a leader, you're judged by a often contradictory set of standards that's much more masculine leaning and much more sort of, this is what we expect of people of power. And sometimes those two things can feel like they conflict for women, particularly in the public eye, and that double bind then becomes a reality. What's your advice for any women that are struggling in male-dominated environments right now, feeling like the odd one out or feeling that pressure to have to change something about themselves?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And just yes to what you said, it's almost like you're walking a tightrope. If I'm too feminine, I might not be taken seriously. Yes. But if I'm too masculine, then they'll think, well, I'm a bitch and I need to smile more. Like it's this, this absolute fine line that you're trying to walk. So what's my advice is, and there's no silver bullet here. I don't, I wish I could say, hey, here's the magic wand to fix it all. I think the advice is just to keep trusting your gut. You know who you are. You know how you perform best, and we're all going to get feedback along our lives, men and women, that doesn't feel great. And it's almost about how do we just keep thinking, you know what, thank you for that feedback, but I'm not going to take that one internally. I'm going to keep being myself. And what I'm trying to do is not so much give women the advice, is show leadership, like the wider leadership teams and organizations, you know what, having a variety of leadership approaches is a brilliant thing for the success of the organization. we don't want to make all our leaders the same, because that's not actually how to run the most effective business.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's the crux of this, right? When you've got a point of difference, although the world will try and make you feel like you need to change it to fit in and kind of blend in with the herd around you, it's the point of difference that is your point of difference, right? That's the magic bullet that you bring to that team. And so leaving that at the door becomes a disservice, not just to us as leaders, but for everyone around us that we lead.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's it. We've all got something magical about us and unique and maybe a bit weird. But when we bring it, I just think it's such a good thing for the organisation to have these different perspectives. And as long as those perspectives are, helping other people, then that's what we want to achieve, right?
Yeah, 100%. Something else you mentioned that I like, the output versus hours thing. I think this is music to my ears. I often talk about it as quantity versus quality, because we are obsessed, ever since the Industrial Revolution, we are obsessed with hours worked and more is always better. And that's why burnout is such an epidemic, right? And yet I love this focus on actually it's the value and impact that we add, whether that's in the 3 things that we do or the 10 things that we do. Quantity doesn't matter. It's the quality that comes first. And I think that's, to your point of output versus hours. And yet the reality is our workplaces are very busy. People are always being asked to do more with less. Leaders find it difficult, I think, to put output before hours. Given that's something you focus on, I would love to delve into that a little bit more with you, particularly off the back of your book, Work School Hours. I'm guessing that's of a similar premise, that more is not necessarily better. It's value before outputs before hours, value before quantity.
Absolutely, Jess. So, yeah, hashtag Work School Hours, which is sort of the movement, the book, and it's not as dogmatic as it sounds. It's, it's principle based. And I'll go. So there's 3 principles, and one of them is around the outputs, which I'll then expand on. So first of all is that we need to value that people have things that they care about beyond work. The kind of old adage of, workers, you're here to do your job, leave your personal life at the door, is just ridiculous. Like, we're whole humans. We that's not how we operate. So when leaders value that their people have lives beyond work, those people feel valued by their leaders, and therefore they do better work for their leaders. The third principle, and then I'll come back to the second, is around giving people more flexibility. But the second one is this idea on outputs, Jess. And so we as a society, you touched on it as well, we hero worship long hours. It's like almost a badge of honour. But there's literally this law of diminishing returns. Working more hours does not make you more productive. In fact, you kind of get this almost like a threshold that you get to, where the more hours you do, you're actually not delivering as much outputs. We actually need rest in between. But the other thing is, it feels like we're just focusing on the completely wrong thing. If you're paying someone for hours as opposed to outputs, and bosses get really caught up, what time did my staff member arrive, what time did they leave, and I'm not paying for someone for those hours if they were doing something else. And I'm like, well, why are you buying an hour? Don't you want to buy the deliverable? Like, what's the thing that they're going to do? And one of the reasons that I'm so keen on this, Jess, is it started because I had a challenge with working parents. I found that working parents were having challenges, I should say. That's where it started. That was the genesis. But I very quickly realised this goes way beyond. It's everyone has stuff beyond work. And what I found is that, the saying, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And so I found that some of the workers that were the most productive in the economy are actually part-time workers, who are typically mums. The majority of people who work part-time contracts are working mothers. And they are some of the most highly efficient people because they have to be. They've got to finish at whatever time it is to go do a school run. So they get their stuff done in less time. And so when we get really clear on outputs, it's amazing how many efficiencies can be gained and how much better lives people can have.
Oh, so true, so true. And I think that's the crux with this, right? We've been looking in the wrong place. We've been focused on hours, more is always better. And that whole kind of industrial revolution, people work in factories and they clock on and they clock off and they get paid every 15 minutes for exactly the amount of time they're there. And then, of course, in the office, that doesn't work so much. Especially when you think of things like presenteeism, and people can literally be sat there in the office but not producing. But I think what's more important in the aha for me in this was the impact it has on our energy and therefore our performance. So flexibility in our hours means we are better when we're working those hours, whether that's 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day. It doesn't really matter, because we're doing a better job if we've got that flexibility. And we're seeing more flexibility in our work now, but we still have those outdated models of more is always better. And I think for me, it was when I wrote Burnout to Brilliance, there was this aha moment that we think the more hours we do, the better we'll perform, because the more we'll get done. That's what we think in our brains. But actually, the more hours we do, the closer we get to burnout. And then, of course, as you mentioned, the quality of what we do starts to suffer. So then what's the point? What's the point in doing the extra hours if cognitively our brains are not as sharp and focused and we're making mistakes? And I think but this is relatively new, right? There's a few of us talking about this, but we still see the majority of our leaders and our workplaces doing the outdated model.
Oh, we do. And I'm an optimist, so I hope the world's going to keep changing in this direction. I know COVID, the silver lining of it was it certainly accelerated some of these conversations. But one of the things I think of, again, is if we focus on outputs and on giving people flexibility, if a leader is really clear with their team, this is the expectation. This is what good looks like. This is what we need to achieve. This is what we need to achieve as a team. I am going to give you some autonomy to actually figure out as a team how you might deliver that. And when people are given that agency to work when their energy levels are best, as you mentioned the word energy there, Jess, which I really agree with. So just for myself as an example, my energy, it doesn't work for 8 hours in one hit between exactly 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Not at all. I personally often work kind of like in sprints. So I'll do a chunk of work and then I might go off and have a walk, because I'll actually do a really good amount of thinking during that time. I'm a bit of a night owl. And I used to think, oh, well, I'm the hashtag work school hours woman and I'm a hypocrite because I'm working at nighttime. But I was like, no, that's the whole point, is you work when it works for you. So I'm not saying that everyone should work at nighttime, but for me, often when the kids have gone to bed, I get some work done and I enjoy that. But then during the day, I'll be doing other things, like I'll be outside going for a walk. I might get some housework done. I've still got a 4-year-old who's not at school, so I spend a day a week with him. And it's just all about working when that works for my energy levels. And I'm not saying leaders should give their team members a complete free-for-all, but I think if they give them some flexibility, they will be amazed at how much more productive their team members will be, because that fixated between 9 and 5 8-hour window is not the best way to achieve the best outputs.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's almost like we're trying to force the humans into the system rather than produce a system that works for humans. And the fact that all humans are different, right, as well. And It's really interesting because, we get the luxury of we're our own bosses, so we do get to set that schedule. But I noticed even in me that feeling of guilt that creeps in, even when you're your own boss and nobody's watching, when you start to, go to yoga at 11 a.m. on a Monday or go for a surf at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday, that feeling of, I should be at my desk doing work. And it takes a lot to break that, I think, and give ourselves permission to do something that's outside the norm. And I'm totally like you. I have my best ideas and my biggest breakthroughs when I'm walking on the beach or in the bush or sat in my hammock in the garden. And it doesn't look like I'm working, but from a value and impact perspective, that matters more to my work, that time that I spend doing that, than anything else I've done on my to-do list all week. And I feel like as leaders, we're sometimes missing that trick because of these systems that we're trying to fit into. So I often say that space is not time away from work, it is the work. And as leaders, we need that space to reflect, to plan, to think about the future. And yet our workplaces don't often allow us, or our schedules don't often allow us that space. What's your advice for leaders that kind of, are in those systems but can see the value in what we're talking about and want to sort of create more of that in their worlds?
Absolutely. So I was sort of touching before on what leaders can do to enable their people, but if this one's more about what can leaders do for themselves in this space. So I'm a team of one right now, right? So I'm in the thought leadership space, but I'm not currently leading people per se. But my last role where I remember I'd take time away to go for a walk. And I was quite loud and proud about it, because what would happen when I was out for that walk, I would be thinking about, okay, the various team members, there might be a conflict between two people, or there might be, some crunchy problem that we're trying to work out. Having that time away from the office was the best time to think and process and come up with ideas. And so I was quite open about sharing that with the team. I was like, not kind of sneaking out. I was like, I'm going to do this because this is going to enable me to do some good thinking. And you know what? There'd be people in the office who would, maybe judge and think, oh, does that really work? But you know what? It'd come back with a great idea, and it's pretty hard to disprove that it was working.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think that's the beauty in this, right? The outdated models tell us that to be productive, we have to head in one direction. But what we're actually seeing is that it's the opposite direction we need to be heading in to achieve that goal. And so I can see that this is starting to shift and starting to change. One of the other things that's obviously shifting and changing is the world around us massively. And I think, you and I will both have seen in the last couple of decades that leadership has changed massively. So what do you think that, in terms of leadership and what it means to you and how it's changed over the years, what do we need to be thinking about as leaders to position ourselves for this future that we're heading into?
So, the first one, which I touched on already, is about being authentic. I think that's, in a world of AI, we need authentic humans more than ever. And so I think, the best thing that leaders can do, and also to encourage their people to do, is to be authentic, because the robots can't replace us on that one. Our humanity is something that's unique to us. So I think that's an important thing for the future. I think the other one is really, these principles that I'm saying about is, workplace flexibility is an absolute, it makes workplaces so much better, and it is the way of the future. Focusing on outputs being the other one. But I think the other sort of, I almost put the overarching thing about, what's the change that I'm seeing in leadership and what's important for the future, is leaders who actually give a shit about their people. And most do. So this is not a discouraging remark, because actually most do. But I really do think there was that old school kind of idea around what leadership was, which was actually more management, not leadership, which was that, first of all, leave your personal stuff at the door, which is impossible. And, I'm not paying you to be happy. I'm paying you to get your work done. Well, actually, happy people do better work. So those two things go hand in hand. So it's that those leaders who are putting people at the heart are actually getting better commercial outcomes. And I think that's just going to keep going into the future. The more you can be a better human, understand how to relate with other people so that they can thrive, that will be successful leadership of the future for both humans, but also in terms of, business outcomes.
Oh, 100%. I think, you're bang on. I have long believed that humanity and our human skills are our point of difference, but even more so in a world of AI, right? And yet, in the leadership space, we've often been encouraged to focus on our technical skills rather than some of those human skills. And, we used to call them people skills, soft skills, even though they're the hardest to master. And now we're seeing that they're actually critical leadership skills that will kind of lead us into the future. Dr. Ellen Joan Ford, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the show. Where can people, what are you up to right now? Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Oh, so my best way to find me is my website, which is my full name, which is ellenjoanford.com. I obviously published my book recently, #WorkSchoolHours. So head there and grab a copy. And in fact, I say this, my goal is not to sell books, it's to change the world. The book's got great stuff in it. So anyone who's listening to this podcast can get a free copy of the ebook. I've created a code, which is Jess. So your name, Jess, type in Jess and you can get that ebook for free. The other stuff I'm up to is really just spreading these messages more with the world. Oh, excuse me, my voice is going. Speaking at events, running workshops, and I just love it. Like you, Jess, it's so neat to go and work with people and see people get excited and kind of get it and then start implementing these things. So
yeah, awesome. And we'll put all those links and details in the show notes as well so that people can find you. Thank you so much for your time today and for being with us on the show. It's been really nice having this corridor and learning more about you and your work. Yeah, you too, Jess. Hey, thanks so much for having me and for letting me share my ideas with you. I appreciate it.